Hello, today I picked up this book, The Masters and the Path by C.W. Leadbeater, the contents of which are the existence of the Masters, the physical bodies of the Masters, the way of the Master, probation, acceptance, other presentations, the first initiation, the ego, the second and third initiations, higher initiations, the work of the Masters, the Chohans and the Rays, the Trinity and the Triangles, the wisdom of the triangles, the power and the will in the triangles, and I wanted to read what it had to say about the first initiation. So let's see. It's about 30 pages. Chapter 7, the first initiation. Most people, when they think of initiation, have in mind a step to be gained for themselves. They think of the initiate as a man who has developed himself very highly and who has become a great and glorious figure as compared with the man of the outer world. That is true, but the whole question will be better understood if we try to look down on it from a higher point of view. The importance of initiation does not lie in the exaltation of an individual, but in the fact that he has now become definitely one with a great order, the communion of saints, as it is very beautifully put in the Christian Church. Though few ever pay attention to the real meaning of these words, the stupendous reality that lies behind initiation into the Brotherhood will be better understood after we have considered the organization of the occult hierarchy and the work of the Masters to be dealt with in later chapters. The candidate has now become more than an individual man because he is a unit in a tremendous force. On every planet, the solar logos has his representative acting as his viceroy. On our globe, the title given to this great official is the Lord of the World. He is the head of the Brotherhood. And the Brotherhood is not only a body of men, each of whom has his own duties to perform, it is also a stupendous unity, a fully flexible instrument in the Lord's hand, a mighty weapon that he can wield. There is a marvelous and incomprehensible plan by which the one, having become many, is now becoming one again. Not that any unit in the whole scheme will lose the least fraction of his individuality or power as a unit, but that he has added to it something 1,000 times greater. He is part of the Lord, part of the body that he wears, of the weapon that he uses, the organ upon which he plays, the implement with which he does his work. In all the world there is but one initiator, but in the case of the first and second initiations, it is open to him to depute some other adept to perform the ceremony for him, though even then that officiant turns and calls upon the Lord at the critical moment of the conferring of the degree. This is a very wonderful moment in the candidate's spiritual life, as was explained by the Master Kuthumi when accepting a pupil not long ago. He said to him, "Now that you have attained the immediate goal of your aspiration, I would exhort you at once to turn your attention to the far greater requirements of the next step, that for which you have now to prepare. The entering upon the stream, which the Christians call salvation, will be the salient point in the long line of your earthly existences, the culmination of 700 lives. Ages ago, by individualization, you entered the human kingdom. In a future which I trust is not remote, you will quit it by the door of a depth ship and become a Superman. Between these two extremes is no point of greater importance than that initiation towards which you should now turn your thoughts. Not only will it make you safe forever, but it will admit you to that brotherhood which exists from eternity unto eternity, the brotherhood which helps the world. Think then with how great care so wondrous an event should be approached. I would have you keep the glory and the beauty of it constantly before your mind, that you may live in the light of its ideals. Your body is young for so mighty an effort, but you have a rare and splendid opportunity. I want you to take it to the full. When an ego is initiated, he becomes part of the closest organization in the world, one with the great sea of consciousness of the great white brotherhood. For a long time, the new initiate will not be able to understand all that this union implies, and he must penetrate far into the sanctuaries before he can realize how close is the link, and how great is that consciousness of the king himself, which all brothers to a certain extent share with him. It is incomprehensible and inexpressible down here, metaphysical and subtle it is beyond words, but nevertheless a glorious reality, real to such an extent that when we begin to grasp it, everything else seems unreal. We have seen how the accepted pupil may lay his thought beside that of the master, so now may the initiate put his thought beside that of the brotherhood, and draw into himself just as much of that tremendous consciousness as he at his level is able to respond to, and ever as he draws it into himself, he will be able to receive more of it, and his own consciousness will widen out so that narrowness of thought will become impossible for him. And just as the accepted pupil must take care not to cause disturbance in the lower vehicles of the master, lest he should interfere with the perfection of his work, so must a member of the brotherhood never introduce anything discordant into that mighty consciousness which he is acting as a whole. You must remember that not by any means the whole of the brotherhood is doing the same work as our masters. Many of them are engaged in other work which requires the utmost concentration and the most perfect calm, and if some of the younger members should sometimes forget their high calling and cause ripples of annoyance to disturb the brotherhood, it would affect the work of those greater ones. Our own masters might perhaps overlook that and be willing to endure a little occasional worry of that kind for the sake of the future, when the new member will be making really great use of the powers of the brotherhood. But we can quite understand that those who have nothing to do with the training of individuals might say, our work is being disturbed, and it is better that those who have such immature personalities should stay outside. They would say that nothing was lost, that progress can be made just as well outside, and that pupils could go on making themselves better and stronger and wiser before gaining initiation. So wonderful is the expansion of the initiate's consciousness that it is most apt to speak of the change as a new birth. He begins to lead a new life as a little child, the life of the Christ, and the Christ, the intuitional or Buddhic consciousness, is born within his heart. He has also now the power to give the blessing of the brotherhood, a tremendous and overwhelming force which he is able to give or send to anyone as he judges to be most appropriate and useful. The power of the brotherhood will flow through him just as much as he will let it flow. It is for him to use the power and to remember that he has the entire responsibility of directing it for whatever purpose he may choose. The blessing given by the officiant as initiation means, I bless you, I pour my force and blessing into you, see that you in your turn constantly pour out this blessing to others. The more confidence the new initiate has, the greater will be the flow of force through him. If he feels the least hesitation or is weighed down by the responsibility of letting such a tremendous power flow through him, he will not be able to use this wonderful gift to the full. But if he has that qualification of Shraddha, perfect trust in his master and in the brotherhood, and the utter certainty that because he is one with them, all things are possible to him, he may go through the world as a veritable angel of light, shedding joy and benediction around his path. The consciousness of the Great White Brotherhood is an indescribably wonderful thing. It is like a great calm shining ocean, so strangely one that the least thrill of consciousness flashes from end to end of it instantaneously, and yet to each member it seems to be absolutely his own individual consciousness, though with a weight and a power and a wisdom behind it that no single human consciousness could ever have. As the band of pupils is all one in the Master, so is the Brotherhood all one in its Lord. The members may freely discuss a point among themselves, yet it is though different aspects of a case presented themselves in the same mind, and were by that mind weighed one against the other, but one is all the time in the presence of a tremendous and almost awful serenity, a certainty which nothing can ever disturb, and yet somehow in all that every suggestion is welcomed. Indeed, there is the sensation that the whole Brotherhood is alertly and eagerly waiting for each individual's contribution to the subject before it. There is nothing down here to which this consciousness can be adequately compared. To touch it is to come into contact with something new and strange, yet inexpressibly wonderful and beautiful, something which needs no evidence and no comparison, but asserts itself to be a higher and unknown world. Though individualities are so strangely merged in this, yet are they at the same time sharply separated, for the assent of each brother is required to every decision of importance. The rule of the king is absolute, yet he carries his vast council with him, and is at every moment willing to consider any point that occurs to any member of it. But this great governing body differs utterly from any parliament of earth. Those who stand above the rest in positions of authority have not been elected, nor have they been appointed by some party organization. They hold their positions because they have won them by superior development and greater wisdom. None doubts the decision of his superior, because he knows that he really is a superior, that he has greater insight and a fuller power to decide. There can be no shadow of compulsion that these supermen shall think or act alike, yet is their confidence in their mighty organization so perfect that it is unthinkable that in the long run they should differ. It is only in the case of such a brotherhood, under such a king, that we can fully realize the beautiful wording of one of the collects of the Church of England: "In his service is perfect freedom." In such an organization there should surely be no possibility of failure or trouble of any sort, and yet, because humanity is frail, because not all members of this great brotherhood are yet supermen, failures do sometimes occur, although they are very rare. Great ones fall back even from the threshold, unable to sustain the weight of their responsibility, unable to pass on, as is said in Light on the Path, and only the attainment of adeptship ensures perfect safety. The initiator tells the candidate that now he has entered upon the stream, he is safe forever, but although that is so, it is still possible for him to delay his progress to a most serious extent if he yields to any of the temptations that still beset his path. To be safe forever is usually taken to betoken the certainty of passing onward with the present life wave, of not being left behind at the day of judgment, which comes in the middle of the 5th round, when the Christ, who has descended into matter, decides that souls can and what souls cannot be carried on to final attainment in this chain of worlds. There is no eternal condemnation. It is, as the Christ said, simply aeonian. There are some who cannot go on in this age of dispensation, but they will follow along in the next, precisely as a child who is too dull to succeed in this year's class will drift comfortably along in the next year's, and will probably even be at the head of it. When the sad and terrible thing does occur, when there is a failure of any sort among initiates, a thrill of pain runs through the whole of that vast consciousness, for the separation of one from the rest is of the nature of a veritable surgical operation, tearing the heartstrings of all. Yet the erring brother cannot finally fall away. there is a link that cannot be broken, although he know little of the weary road of trial and suffering that he must tread before he can again weld it together with the rest. The voice of the silence remains within him, and though he leave the path utterly, yet one day it will resound and rend him asunder, and separate his passions from his divine possibilities. Then, with pain and desperate cries from the deserted lower self, he will return. As in previous chapters, I give here an account of the ceremonial adopted. Its formula has been unchanged throughout the ages, yet there is a certain elasticity about it. The initiator's charge to the candidate is always the same so far as the first part of it goes, but almost invariably there is a second and personal part which consists practically of advice to the particular candidate who is going through. This is usually called the private part of the charge. I have also seen instances in which an image is made of the candidate's worst enemy, and he is asked how he would deal with them, whether he is fully prepared to forgive him absolutely, and whether he would help even one so low as this if it came in his way. In some cases, also, questions are asked as to the work already done by the candidate, and those who have been helped by him are sometimes invited to come forward and bear witness. The account of the first initiation. As the Wesak festival was this year, 1915, on the morning of May 29th, the night of May 27th was chosen for the initiation of the candidate, and we were all instructed to hold ourselves in readiness. In this case, the Lord Maitreya was the initiator, and consequently the ceremony took place in his garden. When the Master Moria or the Master Kuthumi performs the rite, it is usually held in the ancient cave temple, the entrance to which is near the bridge across the river between their houses. There was a large gathering of the adepts, all those whose names are familiar to us being present. The glorious garden was at its best. The rhododendron bushes were one blaze of crimson blossom. The air was fragrant with the scent of the early roses. The Lord Maitreya sat in his usual place on the marble seat which runs around the great tree in front of his house, and the masters grouped themselves in a semicircle on his right and left on seats which were placed for them on the grass terrace from which the marble seat rises by a couple of steps. But the Lord Vivasvata Manu and the Mahakohan sat also on the marble seat, one on each side of the arms of the specially raised carved throne which faces exactly south, which is called the throne of Dakshinamurti. The candidate, with the master who introduced him, stood on the next stage of the terrace at the feet of the Lord, and behind and below them were other pupils, initiated and uninitiated, and a few privileged spectators who were allowed to see a good deal of the ceremony, though at certain times a veil of golden light hid from them the proceedings of the central figures. The candidate was, as always, dressed in flowing robes of white linen, while the masters were mostly clad in white silk, deeply edged with magnificent gold embroidery. A great host of angels floated above the group, filling the air with a soft ripple of melody, which in some strange and subtle way seemed to draw out of the chord of the candidate an intricate interwoven web of sound, expressing his qualities and possibilities throughout the ceremony. This went singing on, delicately supporting all words that were spoken, and no more interrupting them than the soft laughter of a stream interrupts the thrilling music of the birds, but swelling to a triumphant climax at certain points of the ritual. The music made the air vocal, enriching, not drowning, the tones of the speakers. In every case, this music is founded upon the special chord of each candidate, and weaves variations and fugues upon it, expressing in a way that we down here cannot comprehend all that he is and all that he will be. In the center of the scene stood the candidate between his proposer and seconder. He was led forward by his own master Kuthumi, and the master Jesus stood as his seconder. The Lord Maitreya smiled as he asked the opening question of the ritual. "Who is this that you thus bring before me?" Our master gave the usual reply, "This is a candidate who seeks admission to the great Brotherhood." Then came the next question. "Do you vouch for him as worthy of admission?" And the usual answer, "I do." "Will you undertake to guide his steps along the path which he desires to enter?" And the proposer said, "I will. Our rule requires the two of the higher brethren shall vouch for every candidate. Is any other brother prepared to support this application?" Then for the first time the seconder spoke, saying, "I'm prepared to do so." The initiator asks, "You have evidence that if additional powers are conferred upon him, they will be used for the furtherance of the great work?" And the Master Kuthumi replied, "This candidate's life this time has been short, but even already he has many good deeds to his credit, and he is beginning to do our work in the world. Also, in his life in Greece, he did much to spread my philosophy and to improve the country in which he lived." And the Master Jesus added, "Through 2 lives of vast influence, he patiently did my work, righting wrong and introducing a noble ideal in his life as a ruler, and spreading abroad the teaching of love and purity and unworldliness in his incarnation as a monk. For these reasons I stand by his side now." Then the Lord, smiling upon the boy, said, "The body of this candidate is the youngest that has ever been presented to us for the honor of reception into the Brotherhood. Is any member of our Brotherhood who still lives in the outer world ready to give him on your behalf such help and counsel as his young physical body may need?" Sirius came forward from a group of pupils who stood before and said, "Lord, insofar as I am able, and while I remain within reach of his body, I will most gladly do for him all that I possibly can." Then said the Lord, "Is your heart full of true brotherly love for this young candidate, so that you can give such guidance as should be given?" Sirius answered, "It is." The Lord spoke for the first time directly to the candidate. "Do you, in turn, love this brother so that you will willingly be helped by him when necessary?" And the young man replied, "Indeed I do, with all my heart, for without him I could not have stood here." The Lord bowed his head gravely, and the Master put the candidate forward, so that he stood before the initiator. Fixing his eyes upon him, the Lord said, "Do you desire to join the Brotherhood, which exists from eternity unto eternity?" The youth replied, "I do, Lord, if you think that I am fit to do so while my body is still young." The initiator asked, "Do you know the object of this Brotherhood?" The candidate answered that its object is to do God's will by carrying out his plan, which is evolution. "Then," said the Lord, "will you pledge yourself to devote all your life and all your strength henceforth to this work, forgetting yourself absolutely for the good of the world, making your life all love, even as he is all love?" And he answered, "I will endeavor to do so to the utmost of my ability with the help of my Master." "Do you promise to keep secret those things which you are told to keep secret?" And he said, "I promise." The usual questions as to astral knowledge and astral work were then put to the candidate. Many astral objects were shown to him, and he had to tell the initiator of what they were. He had to distinguish between the astral bodies of a living man and a dead man, between a real person and a thought image of a person, and between an imitation master and a real one. Then the initiator showed him many astral cases and asked how he would help in each, and he replied as well as he could. At the end he smiled and said that the answers were very satisfactory. The initiator then delivered the charge, a very solemn and beautiful address, part of which is always to the same effect, though something personal to each candidate is generally added. This charge explains the work of the Brotherhood in the world and the responsibility which rests on each member individually, for each has to share in the bearing of the great burden of the sorrows of the world. Each must be ready to help both by service and by counsel, for it is one brotherhood, acting under one law and one head, and each brother has the privilege of putting any local knowledge or special faculty that he may possess at the disposition of the Brotherhood for the furtherance of any department of their great work of aiding the progress of humanity. Although the rule of the king is absolute, no decision, if of importance, is taken without the consent of even the youngest member of the Brotherhood. Each is a representative of the Brotherhood in whatever part of the world he may be, and each is pledged to be at the disposal of the Brotherhood, to go wherever he is sent, to work in any way that he is required, while younger members will naturally implicitly obey the heads. They may yet help by local knowledge and may always suggest anything that seems to them of possible use. Each brother living in a world must remember that he is a center through which the force of the king may be sent for the helping of those who are in need, and that any older brother may at any time use him as a channel for his blessing. Therefore, each younger brother should always be ready to be so used at any moment, for he never can tell when his services may be required. The life of the brother should be one of entire devotion to others. He should watch eagerly and incessantly for every opportunity of rendering service, and let such service be his keenest joy. He must remember that the honor of the Brotherhood is in his hands, and he must see to it that no word or act of his shall ever sully it in his eyes of men, or cause them to think of it one whit less highly. He must not think that because he has entered the stream, trial and struggle will cease for him. On the contrary, he will have to make still greater efforts, but he will have greater strength to make them. His power will be far greater than before, but in exactly the same proportion. His responsibility is greater also. He must remember that it is not he, a separated self, who has gained a step which has lifted him above his fellows. Rather, he should rejoice that humanity, through him, has risen a little, has freed itself to this small extent from its chains, has come into this much more of its own. The blessing of the Brotherhood is ever with him, but it will descend upon him precisely in the measure in which he passes it on to others. For this is the eternal law. That is part of the charge which is always given. As a private admonition to this candidate, the initiator added, "Your body is very young to bear so heavy a responsibility as this great gift of initiation. Yet that very youth offers you an opportunity as wonderful as any that has ever fallen to the lot of man. It has been earned by the karma of your previous lives of the self-sacrifice. See to it that in this body you prove yourself worthy of it. We trust you to show that, in deciding to open the doors to you as you so soon, we have chosen wisely. Remember always the absolute unity that exists between us, all who are members of the one Brotherhood, so that its dignity shall never suffer at your hands. Beginning this early, you may go very far in this incarnation. The climb will be steep, but your strength and love will be sufficient for it. Cultivate wisdom. Learn perfect control of all your vehicles. Develop in yourself alertness, decision, farsightedness. Remember that I expect you to be ready to act as a trusty lieutenant for me when I come forth to teach the world. You have won the way so far by the wealth of your love. Let that love ever increase and strengthen, and it shall carry you through to the end. Then the Lord turned to the other masters and said, I find this candidate satisfactory. Do all present agree to his reception into our company? All answered, we agree. Then the initiator rose from his seat and turned towards Shambhala and called aloud, Do I this, O Lord of life and light of glory, in thy name and for thee? Do I this, O Lord of light and life and glory, in thy name and for thee? Do I this? Okay. Over his head in response blazed forth the flashing star which conveys the ascent of the king, and all bowed low before it, while the angel music rang out in a triumphant burst like some great royal march. And to these strains the candidate advanced, led by the two masters, and knelt before him who represented the one who alone can grant admission to the Brotherhood. A line of dazzling light, like a flash of lightning, standing still, extended from the stars to the heart of the initiator, and from him to the heart of the candidate. Under the influence of that tremendous magnetism, the tiny silver star of consciousness, which represents the monad in the candidate, swelled out in glowing brilliancy until it filled his causal body, and for a wonderful moment the monad and the ego were one, even as they will be permanently when adeptship is attained. The Lord places his hands upon the head of the candidate, and calling him by the true name, said, In the name of the one initiator whose star shines above us, I receive you into the brotherhood of eternal life. See to it that you are a worthy and useful member of it. You are now safe forever. You have entered upon the stream. May you soon reach the further shore. The angel music pealed forth in a great ocean of sweet, glad sound, and seemed to fill the very air with strength and joy. And the initiator and the kneeling candidate and his sponsors were almost veiled in the loveliest of colors, which brought the blessings of the Bodhisattva and the Mahakohan on their waves, and the exquisite golden light of the flowers of earth's humanity, of Gautama, the Lord Buddha, hovered over them in benediction, for another child of man has entered on the path. And the silver star seemed for a moment to expand and enfold the initiator and the new brother in its blinding glory. And when they came forth from that glory, the robe of the neophyte was no longer linen, but white silk, like those of the other initiates. The picture, when the initiator made his own causal body glow, and that of the new initiate glowed out in response, was enthrallingly beautiful. Green and golden light shone out, and the monad, normally but appearing as a speck of light within the permanent atom of the causal body, shone forth resplendently, so that the brilliant nucleus swelled out and occupied the whole oval. The monad on this occasion identifies himself for the time with the fraction of himself that is the ego, and it is he who takes the vows. The effect on the astral body is also most interesting. A great rhythmical swing is given to it, without disturbing the stability of its equilibrium, so that it is able thenceforth to feel with far greater keenness than before, without being shaken from its own base or escaping from its owner's control. The initiator sets the swing, reproducing his own vibration in the astral body of the neophyte, and at the same time steadying it so that there is no shaking, no disturbance, but an immensely increased power of vibration. When all this had been done, the initiator gave the key of knowledge to the new brother and instructed him how he might infallibly recognize astrally any member of the Brotherhood who was not personally known to him. He directed some of the older pupils of the masters to attend as soon as might be to the necessary buddhi exercises, and the great ceremony ended with the blessing of the new initiate by the assembled brothers. The new brother, in turn, then gave the blessing of the Brotherhood to the world, wielding thus for the first time the new and mighty power which had been conferred upon him as the blessing plays round and through the world, adding new life to everything, giving to each a little more force, a little more beauty. A multitudinous murmur fills the air, myriad whispers that form themselves into a song of deep delight and gratitude. Another force for good has been made manifest, and nature that groans and travails with her children rejoices when one of them enters the Brotherhood that shall at last deliver her from pain. For the life of the world is one life, and when real progress is made by any unit, all nature shares in the gain, even that part of it which we so wrongly call inanimate. So, the wonderful ceremony ended, and the masters gathered around the new brother and gave him hearty congratulations as the blazing star disappeared. On the following night I had orders to present the neophyte to the Lord of the world. This is of course a very unusual honor, and not in any way part of the ceremony of the first initiation. It generally accompanies the third. We repaired to the Shambhala at the appointed time, and were received in the great hall as usual. We found the king in conversation with the Lord Gautama Buddha and the Lord Maitreya. The latter presented the neophyte to the king as our newest brother. And neophyte means newly initiated or newly converted person. The ever-glowing love star and Sanat Kumara smiled graciously upon the youth as he knelt before him. The neophyte raised his hands in the Eastern salutation, and the king put forth his right hand and grasped them as he said to him, "You have done well, my son, and I am pleased with you. I have called you thus before me to tell you so. Go on and do better still, for I expect you to play a great part in the future of my new subrace. My star shone over you visibly a few hours ago. Remember that it hovers over you just as really always when you cannot see it, and where it shines, there shall ever be power, purity, and peace." Then the Lord Buddha, laying his hand upon the neophyte's head, spoke, "I also wish to give you my blessing and my congratulations, for I think that your rapid progress now is an earnest of that which is to come, and that in the future I shall greet you as a brother of the glorious mystery, a member of the spiritual dynasty through whom light comes to the worlds." The three Kumaras, who stood behind, smiled also upon the youth as he knelt speechless, but glowing with love and adoration. The king raised his hand in blessing while we prostrated ourselves, and we came away. Sorry, 1 second. Oh shit. I just don't know what prostrate means. Lying prone or with the face to the ground, brought low in mind or spirit, lying at the mercy of another. trailing along the ground, to bow or cast oneself down, as in adoration or pleading, to throw flat, lay on the ground, to overcome, make helpless. Okay, like to bow in adoration and humble yourself. Okay. Sorry. The king raised his hand in blessing while we prostrated ourselves, and we came away. The time occupied by the ceremony of initiation varies accordingly to several considerations. One of which is the amount of knowledge that the candidate brings with him. Some traditions put the period as 3 days and nights, but it is often finished in much less time. One at which I was present took 2 nights and a day of seclusion, but others have been condensed into 1 night by leaving much that used to be included, to be finished later by the higher pupils of the masters. Some of the old initiations lasted so long because the candidates had to be instructed in astral work. There are also Buddhic experiences which must be realized, for a certain amount of development of the Buddhic vehicle is required for initiation, as some of the teachings which must be given at that level could not otherwise be understood. Most theosophists have already done astral work, and thus have learned the detail of the astral world, much of which must be taught at this time if it is not already known. But when the initiator knows that the candidate has already some Buddhic development, it has several times been left to the older pupils to carry the candidates through the Buddhic experiences on the following night, or whenever it could be arranged. The actual ceremony of initiation takes less than 6 hours, but a certain amount of time is given to the candidates both before and afterwards. The masters always congratulate the candidates after the initiation, and each says a few kindly words. They take the opportunity of such a gathering to transmit certain orders to their pupils. And, generally, it is in an occasion of great rejoicing, at any rate, among all the younger members. It is a victory for all when another neophyte is admitted, when one more is safe forever. We have already spoken of the close relation between an accepted pupil and his master. All the time this intimacy has been steadily growing, and it usually happens that when the pupil is approaching the portal of initiation, the master considers that the time is ripe for him to draw the chela into a still deeper union. He is then called the son of the master, and the link is such that not only the lower mind, but also the ego, is the causal body of the pupil, is enfolded within that of the adept, and the latter can no longer draw a veil to cut off the pupil. There is a beautiful reference to this state of closest union in Light on the Path, where it is written, quote, "My peace I give unto you," can only, can only be said by the master to the beloved disciple who are as himself, unquote. And so these are they who have the inestimable privilege of being able to pass on that peace to others in all its fullness. Any accepted pupil of the master has the right and the duty to bless in his name, and a splendid outpouring of the master's power will assuredly follow his effort to do so. Especially should he give that blessing mentally whenever he enters a house. Quote, "May the blessing of the master rest on the house and on all who live therein," unquote. But the son of the master can give the very touch of his intimate presence a fuller and greater peace. But he who is a son of the master either is or soon will be a member of the great white brotherhood also, and that, as we have said, gives the power to wield an even greater blessing, though both are appropriate, each in its several place. I will remember giving each of these on different occasions to a great angel of the neighborhood, with whom I have the honor to be well acquainted. Passing close to his territories in a vessel, I gave him once as a greeting the full blessing of my master, and it was indeed beautiful to see the way in which he received it, bowing profoundly, and showing his appreciation by a lovely soft glow of holiness and uttermost devotion. Another day, under similar circumstances, I gave him the blessing of the Brotherhood, and instantly every power of that great angel flashed out in glad response, and the whole of his territory lit up. It was as though a soldier had leapt to attention, as though everything, not only within himself, but in all the thousands of minor creatures working under him, had suddenly been vivified and raised to its highest power. All nature instantly responded. You see, my master, however deeply reverenced by him, is not his master, but my king is his king, for there is but one. The question as to whether a man is approaching fitness for initiation involves three separate sets of considerations, all depending upon one another. The first is as to whether he is in possession of a sufficient amount of necessary qualifications as laid down at the feet of the master, and that means that he must have a minimum of all and very much more than a minimum of some of them. To illustrate this, think for a moment of the method adopted in marking papers at certain examinations. It is determined beforehand by the examiners that no candidate shall be allowed to pass who falls below a certain minimum in each of the subjects, but the percentage required in each subject is very low, say 25%. Anyone who fails to secure 25% of the marks in any subject will fail, but nevertheless, one who secures exactly that amount in each of these subjects will not succeed. For not only are separate minima set for the different subjects, but there is also a total minimum, let us say 40%. One, therefore, who falls as low as 25 or 30% is one or two of his subjects, must make very much more than that in several other subjects. In order to attain the average required, this is precisely the method adopted in occultism. There must be a certain amount of each of these qualifications present in the successful candidate, but he must have very thoroughly developed some of them. A candidate cannot succeed if he be entirely lacking in discrimination. Yet if he shows much less of that than he should, an overflowing flood of love may perhaps be accepted as atoning for it. Secondly, the ego must have so trained his lower vehicles that he can function perfectly through them when he wishes to do so. He must have effected what in our earlier theosophical literature was called the junction of the lower and higher self. And thirdly, he must be strong enough to stand the great strain involved, which extends even to the physical body. As to the level of progress at which he will be initiated, there is room for very great variety. It would be a mistake to suppose that all initiates are equal in development, just as it would be unsafe to assume that all men who have taken the degree of Master of Arts are equal in knowledge. It is quite possible that a man might have done exceedingly well in many of the qualities required and be far beyond the total minimum, and yet be seriously deficient and below the minimum standard in one subject. It would then, of course, be necessary for him to wait till he had the minimum in that neglected subject, and no doubt while he was acquiring that, he would be developing the others still further. It is therefore obvious that while there is a certain attainment required for initiation, some of those who are presented for it may have achieved far more than that in some directions. We see, too, that there is likely to be considerable variation in the interval between initiations. One man who has just now been able to take the first may nevertheless possess a considerable share of the qualifications for the second. Therefore, for him, the interval between the two might be unusually short. On the other hand, a candidate who had only just sufficient strength in all directions to enable him to pass through the first would have slowly to develop within himself all the additional faculties and knowledge necessary for the second, so his interval would probably be long. We have now entered upon a period in the world's history in which progress at all levels of evolution can be very rapid, because the near coming of the world teacher has set up so strong a tide of thought and feeling about spiritual things, all in the direction of progress, that anyone who now makes an effort along that line finds himself swimming with the current and advancing swiftly. This refers not merely to the current of human thought and feeling. In fact, human thought is but a very small part of that tide, for the human beings who know anything definite as to the nearness of the coming are but a minority. What counts most is the tremendously powerful thought and feeling of the vast hosts of the great angels who know of the plan and are trying to in every way to help it. Such rapid progress is, however, a very decided strain, a thing which few aspirants sufficiently realize. The student of occultism who sets before himself the idea of hastening his development will do well to remember that one of the necessities is good physical health. He wishes to make in one life the progress which under ordinary circumstances would be distributed over 20 or more, and as the amount that has to be done is the same in either case, for no reduction whatever has been made in the standard of the requirements for initiation, it is obvious that he must work all his vehicles very much harder if he is to succeed. It is possible on the physical plane to shorten the period of study usually assigned to any given examination, but a man can do it only by putting a far greater tax upon his brain, his attention, his eyesight, his power of endurance, and we all know how fatally easy it is for him to strain himself in any one of these directions, and thereby seriously to injure his physical health. Similar conditions attend upon the efforts to hasten spiritual evolution. It can be done, it has been done, and it is a very fine thing for any man to do, always with his provision that he must watch very carefully against overstrain, lest in the ultimate he should delay his development instead of advancing it. It is not sufficient to have good physical health at the beginning of one's endeavor. It is also necessary to preserve it until the end, for the progress itself is but a means to an end, and we try to develop ourselves, not that we may become great and wise, but that we may have the power and the knowledge to work for humanity to the best effect. We must never forget that occultism is above all the apotheosis of common sense. Hitherto, except very rarely, persons have been initiated only after their physical bodies have come to mature age, and after they have proved by their activities in life that their hearts are pledged to the work of the Logos. During the last few years, however, certain egos whose bodies are still young have been given the privilege of initiation, and we understand that this has been done in order that when the Lord comes, he may find a band of young workers ready to serve him. On his arrival, the world teacher will wield the wondrous consciousness of the Brotherhood and the more helpers dwelling in physical bodies that he can draw around him at any given place, the more will his work be facilitated. He can use the services of any ordinary man of the world to the extent of that man's capacity, but one who is already an accepted pupil of the Master would be of far more use to him in many directions than the man of the world could ever be. and of almost infinitely greater use still would be one who had passed the portal of initiation and had awakened all the multiple links which bind together the members of the Brotherhood. It is always the ego who is initiated. The age of the physical body which it happens to be holding at a given time has little to do with the case. In all cases, when young people have been initiated, other members of the Brotherhood living near to them or in touch with them in the physical body have undertaken to assist and guide them. This is necessary because of the great responsibility that initiation brings along with its expansion of consciousness and additional faculty and power. A wrong action or a false step on the part of the initiate involves bigger karmic consequences than a similar action on the part of one who is not a member of the Brotherhood. Therefore, perhaps it will be well to include here a few directions for these younger people. Each one should ever remember that he was initiated because in past lives, and perhaps in the present one, he has helped the world to a certain requisite degree, and it is hoped that he will continue in that path and become an ever larger channel for the life of the Logos. It is because of the probability of his increased usefulness that he is admitted to initiation, and at the ceremony he takes the pledge, not only as the ego but as the monad, that he will make it his life work to pour himself out in blessing, even as the Logos is continually streaming forth his love. He must therefore each day and hour keep this pledge in mind and subserve all things to it. His karma from the past gives him various personal characteristics and impulses. He must take heed lest these drive him to think of himself and his own well-being rather than of the greater self and the welfare of the world, before he can undertake the larger work awaiting him. The youthful initiate has often to prepare himself by an ordinary training in college and university. In that case, he will be plunged into circumstances of vigorous activity and many self-centered interests. Life surrounds him with many temptations and with occasions tending to make him forget his pledge to the Brotherhood. Through them all he must have a clearly defined attitude, that he has thrown in his lot with the aims of the Brotherhood, and that life in the world on every occasion, whether of study, recreation, or amusement, he must definitely hold the thought, is this that I am going to do likely to make me better equipped for the Master's work, or a better channel to spread love and happiness? He must always remember that the Brotherhood has the first claim on his services, and must never put himself in any position which makes it impossible for him to fulfill that duty. It is not intended that he should live the life of a hermit, but while he lives that life in society which will give him the growth he requires, he must all the time watch to see whether it is making him more of a channel for the Logos. Henceforth, for him, any experience, however pleasant and harmless, which cannot make him a fuller channel for the Logos or give an opportunity for service, is valueless to him, and is so much waste of time. He should try to take advantage of every opportunity to help that he sees, and to learn such things as will make him useful. When the pupil takes the great step of initiation and becomes a member of the Brotherhood, he also becomes in a far greater and more special sense than before the brother of every one of his fellow men. This does not mean that he must direct their lives and try to guide them with criticism. It is not his business in life to criticize, but to encourage. But if he sees reason to make any suggestion, he must do it with the very greatest care and courtesy. The world does not see the higher members of the Brotherhood, therefore it is apt to judge that organization by the junior members who come within its purview. That is what is meant by the remark in the charge at initiation, that the neophyte holds the honor of the Brotherhood in his hands. It is his duty to stream forth love and benediction so that every place in which he happens to be is happier because of his presence. He must therefore steadily turn outwards. Henceforth, it does not matter to him what judgment the world gives on his actions, but only what judgment the Brotherhood gives. Whether he is popular or unpopular with the world matters not at all, if through all his conduct he has been loyal to the ideals placed before him. Some senior members of the Brotherhood may desire to use him at any moment, wherever he happens to be, and sometimes without his knowing it, in the brain consciousness. But he cannot be used if, at the moment when he is needed, he is found brooding over his own affairs and turned inwards, not outwards to the world. The supreme need for him is the building of character, so that when his master looks at him, he will find him thinking of the world's welfare, and not whether that world is giving him happiness or misery. So after reading that, I was kind of looking up what the Great White Brotherhood was, and I found this. C.W. Leadbeater is known for his works related to the Great White Brotherhood. In his 1925 book, The Masters and the Path, he extensively uses the term Great White Brotherhood to refer to a group of perfected beings who spread spiritual teachings through selected humans. So this was some brotherhood that he was a part of, and it seems as if the main point of this was to spread the logos of God throughout the world and to be a self-sacrificing human when needed to spread the logos. And it's just funny because I was like, clearly that is a positive, that seems like a positive thing. Leadbeater's work often discussed the concept of ascended masters and their influence on human spiritual development, aligning with their beliefs of theosophy and New Age thought. So there's also this Renee Guénon book that is on theosophy itself and its history of the pseudo-religion and its failures, essentially, and the people within it, like Blavatsky, being like facades, like not who they seem to be, and even Steiner left theosophy and studied anthroposophy instead due to the failures of theosophy. And well, what I was going to say before is earlier today I was behind a car that had a fraternity license plate, and like immediate disgust came over me. Without ever being involved in any fraternity or sorority, it had never once crossed my mind to join something like that or to be part of that. And as I have said in other videos before, this like thing that happens with groupthink, when you have groups of people all kind of aiming at the same trajectory. Granted, the Brotherhood of the Great White Hope, just kidding, the Great White Brotherhood, it's like seemingly a positive brotherhood, but there was a distinct message of the individuality of each initiate, which is necessary. It can't be any other way. Well, I suppose in an actual cult, I'm sure everybody is on the exact same page, but it just is completely unnatural to me to be in a brotherhood or a fraternity or a sorority And to have a large group of people behaving like bees in a beehive, all ascending towards this same trajectory and path. And it's just curious to me, the lack of individuality and like what this even represents. And there's a part where after the, like what I just read, after the young pupil gets initiated, and it seems as if like light, like something is shown to everybody, which I'm sure did not happen. So it's just some things that don't make sense. Obviously, I think I don't know exactly. I think perhaps like Leadbeater is maybe aware of the mysteries of such groups and is playing to that a little bit. I can't foresee there being a initiation ritual in which laws of nature are defied. But yeah, I mean, it was an interesting read anyways, and I do believe in self-sacrificing for the betterment of all people, and strong morals and character in an individual, and how that proceeds karmically throughout lifetimes. I'm just always curious about brotherhoods and groups of people, and I think the individual is forever alone and meant to be alone. And in theosophy, although I love learning about it, it leaves a very bad taste in my mouth. But I'm gonna keep reading this and seeing what else goes down, because it's cool enough. So yeah, thanks for listening to this, and yeah, maybe I'll read some more, see what else he's got to say.